The market was loud, crowded, and full of strange smells. Bright lights flashed, and traders shouted in many languages. But behind a black curtain, it was quiet. Too quiet. Valari stood there, her arms wrapped around a small, shivering girl, her daughter Lura. Her body was thin, her skin pale and dry, her clothes old and torn. She hadn't eaten in days, but her child came first. Always. A large alien trader with 4 eyes and gold rings on his arms walked in. He looked at Valari and grunted, "You're next." Valari nodded without a word. She had made her choice. She would give herself away. Not for gold, not for fame, but for food. Her daughter needed to eat. Outside the curtain, the stage was ready. Crowds of buyers stood waiting, their faces bored, some laughing. They were here for strange things, living things, slaves, entertainers, machines that could bleed. Jonas, a human traveler, walked through the market. He had just landed on this strange planet to buy ship parts. He didn't care for auctions or crowds. But then he heard something. A child crying. It was soft, hidden. Under the noise, he turned his head and something pulled him toward the stage. The trader stepped onto the platform, his voice deep and rough. "Next item." A rare female from the broken lands of Terralis, strong enough to work, young enough to please. Some in the crowd laughed. "A useless kind," one alien whispered. "Too skinny, looks like a ghost." Another chuckled. Then Valari stepped onto the stage, holding Lura. A spotlight hit her face and she squinted. The crowd went silent for a second, just 1 second. Then someone shouted, "What's the starting price? 1 credit?" And more laughter followed. Valari gently handed Lura to a quiet corner of the stage. Her daughter's eyes were full of fear. Valari gave her a weak smile, then stood tall. Her voice trembled. "I am strong. I can work." But no one cared. Jonas stood at the back, eyes locked on her. He didn't know why, but something about her, the way she held her child, the way she stood so proud while shaking inside, made his heart beat faster. He stepped forward. The trader was losing the crowd's interest. "Fine." Starting bid. 2 credits, anyone. No hands went up. "Come on, she comes with a child, bonus meat." The laughter grew cruel. Valari looked down, ashamed, but didn't run. Then a clear voice came, calm and sharp. 10 credits, Jonas said. Everyone turned. The trader blinked. 10? You serious? Jonas nodded. "I'll take both, the woman and the child." The crowd went silent again. Some looked angry, some surprised. One alien hissed, "Humans are strange." Another muttered, "Wasting money on trash." The trader smiled wide. "Sold to the human fool." Valari stared at Jonas as he stepped onto the stage. She didn't move, frozen like stone. "Come," he said gently. "You're safe now." She shook her head. "Why? Why would you buy me?" Jonas looked at her daughter, then back at her. "Because no one should have to give themselves away to feed their child," he said. She didn't understand, not yet. He handed her a warm blanket, lifted the little girl, and guided them off the stage. The crowd behind them whispered, laughed, forgot. But for Valari, the world had changed in that moment. She was no longer alone, but she didn't know what came next. Was it kindness, or just another kind of cage? Her heart beat fast, not with fear, but with something she hadn't felt in years. Hope, and far above them in the silent night sky, the stars watched closely. Something had shifted. A story had just begun. Valari sat on the edge of a soft bed, unsure if she was allowed to touch it. She kept her daughter, Lura, close, holding her like a shield. They were inside a clean metal room with warm lights and soft air. The ship was small, human-made, but it felt bigger than any home she'd known. Jonas placed a warm bowl of food on the small table. "Eat," he said kindly. "Both of you." Valari flinched. "What? What do you want in return?" Jonas sat down across from her and shrugged. "Nothing," he replied. "Just rest." Valari didn't believe him. In her world, kindness always had a price. She stared at the food, waiting for a command. Jonas stood and walked toward the control panel, giving her space. Lura reached for the food first. Her small fingers shaking, Valari let her eat, but she didn't touch the bowl herself. She watched Jonas instead, his back turned. No whip, no collar, no threats. Still, fear sat heavy in her chest. After Lura finished eating, she curled into her mother's lap and fell asleep. Valari finally took one bite, warm, soft, full of life. Tears filled her eyes. She wiped them away quickly, ashamed to cry. Jonas spoke without turning. "You don't have to stay." Valari looked up, confused. "What? You're not a prisoner," he said. "I bought your freedom, not your body." Her heart skipped. "No chains? No orders?" He turned to face her. "No." She didn't understand. He handed her a clean blanket. "There's a shower in the back." Valari stood slowly, still waiting for a trick. But when she reached the door, it opened without resistance. Inside was light, warmth, running water. She looked at her reflection in the small mirror, sunken eyes, dry lips, tangled hair. She turned on the water, expecting it to be cold, but it was warm, gentle. She stepped in, hands shaking, letting the dirt wash away. With each drop, a piece of fear melted from her body. Later, dressed in soft fabric Jonas had given her, she sat on the bed again. Lura still slept. Her tiny hand resting on her mother's leg, Jonas handed her a small cup of water and asked, "Where are you from?" Valari hesitated, then whispered, "Terralis." He nodded. "I've heard of it, destroyed during the war." She looked down. "Yes. I lost everything." Jonas didn't ask more. He just said, "I'm sorry." Those two words shook her, more than any threat ever had. No one had said sorry before, not for her pain. The next day, she found a small corner of the ship set up with blankets and toys. Laura's new space. Jonas had even given her a stuffed creature that looked like a bear but with 4 arms. Laura hugged it tight and giggled. Valari watched, stunned. Her child was laughing. When was the last time that happened? Later, Valari tried to clean the ship to repay Jonas. He stopped her gently. "You don't need to do this." "I must earn my place," she replied. "You already have," he said. "You survived." His words confused her. Survival had never been something to be proud of before, but now maybe it was. That night, Valari sat near the window, watching the stars move past. Jonas brought her a hot drink, something called cocoa. She tasted it and smiled without thinking. It was sweet, soft, and strange. She finally asked him, "Why did you really buy me?" Jonas took a deep breath. "Because I saw a mother willing to break herself for her child." He looked into her eyes. "That kind of love is rare." Valari said nothing. But deep inside her, something stirred. A strange warmth she had forgotten long ago. Trust? Jonas stood and walked away, letting her rest. Valari looked at her sleeping daughter, at the stars beyond the glass. Maybe, just maybe, this human didn't want to break her. Maybe he wanted to fix what others had destroyed. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and whispered, "Thank you." And for the first time in years, she fell asleep without fear. Jonas sat in the control seat, staring into space as the ship drifted through the trade lanes. The hum of the engine was soft, steady. Behind him, the quiet sound of breathing reminded him he was no longer alone. Valari sat in the far corner, arms wrapped around her knees, her eyes open but distant. She hadn't spoken all morning. Lura played on the floor with the strange 4-armed bear, smiling, talking to it softly. Jonas turned and asked, "Would you like some tea?" And Valari blinked, surprised he spoke so gently. "I'm not used to warm drinks," she said, her voice dry but polite. He poured the tea anyway and handed her the cup. She took it with 2 hands like it might disappear. A long silence followed. Jonas didn't push her. He simply sat across from her, sipping his own tea. Finally, Valari spoke. "My planet wasn't always like this," she said quietly. "There were gardens, colors so bright they hurt your eyes." She looked at Lura, who now hummed to herself. We had a home. We had peace. Jonas nodded, waiting. They came during the Second Cycle War. Machines with no faces, she continued. They didn't want our land, just our bodies. Her fingers tightened on the cup. My mate, he fought. He tried to hide us. Her eyes lowered. He didn't survive. Jonas swallowed, the lump in his throat rising. I'm sorry, he said. Valari nodded, not expecting comfort. I ran with Lura, hid in tunnels, begged on backworld, streets. She paused. No one helped. Not until you. Jonas didn't say anything for a moment. Then he asked, why did you keep fighting? Valari looked confused. Because of her, she said, pointing at Lura. She didn't ask to be born in a broken world. Her eyes filled with quiet fire. I swore I'd keep her alive even if I had to sell everything, even myself. Jonas looked at her differently now, not as a rescued stranger, but as something stronger, a survivor, a fighter. He said softly, you did more than survive. Valari stared at him, unsure what he meant. You kept your soul, Jonas said. Most would have lost that. Later, Lura climbed into Valari's lap, yawning. Jonas smiled. She's happy now. Valari brushed Lura's hair with her fingers. She laughs in her sleep sometimes, she whispered. She didn't used to. They sat in silence again, peaceful silence this time. Then Jonas reached into a drawer and pulled out a small silver disc. I want to show you something, he said. He pressed the button and a hologram flickered to life. A little human girl danced in a sunny field, her laugh filling the room. Valari's eyes widened. She was my sister's daughter, Jonas said, his voice low. They died in a fire years ago. Valari stared at the joyful image. I left Earth after that, couldn't stay there anymore. The laughter from the hologram faded. Jonas turned it off. I know what it's like to lose family. Valari looked at him, her voice trembling. Then why help me? He smiled, just a little. Because I couldn't help them. Valari closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed and she whispered, thank you. Jonas said nothing more, just nodded. Later that night, Valari stood by the window, watching the stars. Jonas stood beside her, quiet, respectful. I don't understand you, Valari admitted. Humans are strange. Jonas laughed softly. We are. But maybe strange is what you needed, he added. She looked at him, truly looked, not as a master, not as a buyer, but as a man. And for the first time, she didn't feel like she had to run. She turned to go back to her daughter, but before leaving, she paused and asked, if I wanted to stay, just stay, would that be allowed? Jonas nodded. This is your ship too now, he said. And in that moment, Valari smiled. Not a big smile, not loud, but real. The kind of smile that comes after years of cold. The kind that says maybe, just maybe, the worst is over, and something better has finally begun. The ship drifted peacefully above a quiet moon. Valari was cooking a simple meal, something she'd learned from Jonas. Lura laughed behind her, drawing on the wall with safe ink pens. It felt like a home, a real one. Jonas came in from the control room, wiping oil from his hands. He smiled. Smells better than ration packs. Valari smiled back, shy but proud. You taught me well, she replied. But before they could sit down to eat, a loud beep echoed through the ship. Jonas frowned, walked to the screen, and tapped it. His face hardened. What is it? Valari asked, her voice tightening. Galactic patrol ship, he said slowly. They're requesting to board. Valari's hands went cold. Her knees felt weak. She pulled Lura close without thinking. Why are they here? She whispered. Jonas, check the ID. They're scanning for illegal beings, he said, random checks. Maybe. But they both knew it wasn't random. Within minutes, the door opened with a hiss. Two tall, armored officials stepped inside, their silver suits shining under the lights. Their eyes scanned everything, Walls, furniture, people. One of them stepped forward and looked directly at Valari. ID papers, he barked. Valari trembled, holding Lura tighter. I don't have any, she admitted. The official looked at Jonas. Explain. Jonas crossed his arms. I purchased her legally from the auction at Port Kalen. She is not registered in the universal system, the officer snapped. She's not cargo anymore, Jonas replied firmly. She's free. The second officer stepped forward, scanning Lura. This child is also unregistered. Leave her alone, Valari said sharply, stepping in front. But the officer didn't stop. She's a minor from a war-torn planet. She could be claimed by the system. Jonas's voice rose, steady and strong. She's not a stray, she's with me. The officer narrowed his eyes. You are breaking 5 laws by harboring an unmarked alien and her offspring. We'll need to take them in for proper processing. Valari felt her world crack. Again, her arms tightened around Lura, who started crying softly. No, she whispered. Please, not again. Jonas stepped between them and the officers. You're not taking them, he said, calm but dangerous. The lead officer scoffed. You'll be charged too. Jonas smiled coldly. Then do it. He pressed a small button on his wrist. A second later, a light flashed on the wall. A beacon had been activated. What did you do? The officer snapped. I just called my old friends, Jonas said. Earth's allied defense doesn't like its citizens being bullied. The officers paused, hesitating. Stand down, Jonas added, or you'll start something bigger. Then paperwork. Valari watched, stunned. This human wasn't just kind. He was powerful in ways she never guessed. Minutes later, a message came through, direct from a nearby human patrol ship. Jonas, need help? The voice asked over. Comms. Jonas looked at the officials. Still want to take them? The officers stepped back, murmuring between themselves. One finally said, They must attend a formal hearing on the nearest neutral station. Fine, Jonas agreed. But I'll be there too. They left without another word. As the ship's door closed again, silence returned. Valari sank to the floor, holding Lura. Her heart was pounding, her hands shaking. Jonas crouched beside her, his voice soft. I won't let them take you. Not ever. Valari looked up at him. Tears in her eyes. Why do you fight so hard for us? Because you're not just some alien woman, he said. You're a mother, and that matters. For a long time she said nothing. Then slowly she nodded. Then I'll go to that hearing, she whispered. I'll speak, even if... My voice shakes. Jonas smiled. That's all I need. And behind her, Lura finally stopped crying. In her mother's arms, she knew. This human wouldn't let them break again. Outside, stars continued to shine. But now, the path ahead was uncertain, not because of fear, but because justice would now be tested and Valari would not be silent anymore. The space station floated like a silver coin between stars. It was called Hallen's Ring, a neutral place where beings from many worlds came to settle disputes. But today, the court would not hear about borders or trade. Today, it would hear the voice of a forgotten alien mother. Valari stood in front of a tall glass wall watching ships dock and leave. Lura clung to her leg, half asleep. Jonas stood beside them, silent but steady. A human officer approached. They're ready for you inside. Valari's hands trembled. Jonas leaned close, whispering, You don't have to be loud. Just be honest. The courtroom was round, high-ceilinged and full of watchers, aliens, humans, diplomats, and lawkeepers. Valari had never seen so many different eyes staring at her. She felt like she was back on the auction stage. But this time, no one held chains. A tall alien judge, with skin like smooth stone, sat at the center. He tapped a crystal and spoke. This case involves the unregistered female of Terralis origin and her minor child. She was purchased by human male, Jonas Merrick, outside regulation. A voice from the left side rose, sharp and cold. She was bought, not adopted, said a trade official. She is property by galactic law. Jonas stood. She's not a tool, he said clearly. She's a person and a mother. Gasps echoed across the room. The judge raised his hand. "Let the female speak." Valari stepped forward slowly, her knees weak but her spine straight. She looked up at the court, then down at her daughter. And finally, she began. "I didn't ask to be sold," she said quietly. "I didn't want to stand on that auction block. But I had no choice." She took a deep breath, her voice steadying. "I was once a scholar, a gardener, a wife. But war stole my world, took my people, burned my home. Lura was all I had left," she said, her hand resting gently on her child's head. "No one helped us, not until the human did. He gave us food, shelter, and asked for nothing." An alien on the council leaned forward. "But did he not purchase you?" Valari nodded. "Yes. But he gave me freedom before I could even understand what it meant." Another council member asked. "Why didn't you leave then?" Valari smiled softly. "Because for the first time in years my daughter laughed. Because I stopped being afraid of the night." The judge watched her closely. "You speak well." Valari looked him in the eye. "Because I was not born a slave," she said firmly. "I was made one by fear." Jonas stood again, holding a small device. "I submit this," he said. A hollow record of her speaking Teralis law, declaring her people had rights long before the system ignored them. The judge reviewed it in silence. Then he looked to the council. There was tension in the room. Some frowned, others whispered, but one voice broke through it all. "She's just like my mom," said a small human voice. Everyone turned. A child ambassador, no more than 10, had stepped forward from the observer's box. "She reads stories. She braids hair. She sings. When her daughter's scared," the child said. "Isn't that what a mom does?" The silence that followed was heavy and deep. Finally, the judge tapped the crystal again. "We declare Valari and her child free citizens under the Refugee Mothers Protection Treaty." "They are no one's property," Valari gasped, tears filling her eyes. Lura looked up. "Mama?" "What happened?" Valari hugged her tightly, whispering, "We're free, my love, we're free." Jonas walked over and placed a hand on Valari's shoulder. "You did it," he said with pride. "No," she replied with a small smile. "We did." As they walked out of the court, cameras flashed, people watched, but Valari didn't care anymore. She held her daughter in one arm, and beside her walked the human who had changed everything. She was no longer a slave, no longer invisible. She was a voice the galaxy could no longer ignore, and that voice would lead her home, wherever that would be next. The court hearing was over, but something still felt unreal. Valari sat quietly in Jonas's ship as stars stretched outside the window. She had no collar now, no number, no papers with her value printed in red ink. She was not property anymore. She was a person again. But what now? Freedom was a gift, yes, but it also came with a heavy question. Where to go? Jonas didn't rush her. He made no plans without asking. He simply asked, "What do you want to do?" Valari had never been asked that before. She didn't know how to answer, so she said, "I want to stay somewhere Lura can laugh every day." Jonas smiled at that. "I think I know just the place," he said. And he took them to a small green, planted on the edge of the human colonies. It wasn't fancy or famous, but it had blue skies, soft rains, and wide fields filled with flowers. The people there weren't rich, but they were kind. They didn't ask where Valari came from. They didn't stare at Lura's glowing alien eyes. They just said, "Welcome," and meant it. Jonas helped them build a small home on the edge of a quiet hill. It was simple. 3 rooms, 1 window always open to the sun. Valari planted herbs outside, her fingers learning the earth again. Lura ran barefoot through the grass, her laughter echoing down the valley. One evening, Valari served a meal she made from her own garden. Jonas took 1 bite and smiled. "You're better than half the chefs I've met." She laughed, surprised at herself. It was a real laugh, not nervous, not forced. Jonas stared at her for a moment, not saying anything, just smiling like he was looking at something rare. The next morning, Valari woke to a strange sound. Lura had built a pretend shop outside with sticks and flower petals. She was selling mud pies and pretending to be a chef. Valari joined her, and together, they played in the sunlight. At night, Jonas brought out an old music box. It played soft earth melodies, unfamiliar but soothing. Valari listened with her eyes closed, then slowly began to hum along. Her voice was soft, almost broken, but real. One afternoon, a trade ship landed near the village. The merchant offered Jonas money, lots of it, for Valari's woven artwork. Valari's hands had found their skill again, crafting cloth and string into glowing designs, but she shook her head. "These aren't for sale," she said kindly. The merchant frowned. "Why not? You could be rich." Valari looked at Lura playing nearby, then at Jonas planting vegetables by the fence. "I already am," she whispered. Jonas laughed when she told him later. "Careful, people might think you've gone soft." Valari looked at him with a playful smile. "Maybe I've just grown strong enough to stop chasing things." That night, Lura curled up between them on a soft blanket under the stars. Valari watched the sky, remembering how cold it used to feel. Now it felt warm, alive, like a sky that belonged to her too. Jonas turned to her, voice gentle. "You don't owe me anything," he said. Valari nodded. "I know. But I want to give something back anyway," she added. He raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" She took a deep breath, her hand brushing his. "Like trust," she whispered. "Like a place in my life." Jonas didn't reply right away. He just smiled, his hand closing over hers, slowly. And that was enough. The stars above were still. The same. But Valari wasn't. She was no longer running, hiding, or breaking. She was building, smiling, healing. Her child was fed, safe, and happy. Her heart, once wrapped in chains, now beat freely beside someone who never asked to hold it, but protected it anyway. A new home had begun, not just made of wood and soil, but of quiet moments, warm meals, and promises never spoken but deeply understood. The sun rose gently over the small green hill where their house stood. Valari was already awake, hands brushing through the soft leaves of her herb garden. Lura chased butterflies behind her, giggling, her laughter as natural as the wind. It was peaceful, so peaceful it almost felt like a dream. Jonas stepped out of the house with a hot mug in hand. He watched the two of them with soft eyes. Valari turned, smiled, and nodded. "You wake up early now?" he teased. "I like hearing the earth breathe," she replied. Inside the home, woven cloths hung like small stars, each one made by Valari's careful fingers. Visitors from nearby villages came now and then, not to gawk, but to admire. They whispered, "These carry emotion." One trader offered a pile of credits for a single piece. Valari smiled and said, "I used to sell myself for food, but this is not for sale." The trader blinked, confused. "Then why make it?" Valari looked at Lura drawing pictures with chalk. "For joy," she said. "Something you can't buy." Later that week, the village gathered for the season's harvest fair. Children danced, food was shared, and songs played in every language. Jonas, for once, wore something other than dusty boots. Valari had woven him a deep blue sash with silver thread. He tugged at it awkwardly. "I feel like a royal servant," she laughed. "You look like someone who has a home." The mayor approached them during the fair. "Jonas," he said, "we've built a schoolhouse. We'd like you to help, teach." Jonas looked surprised. "I haven't taught in years." The mayor smiled. "That's why you'll be good at it." Valari stood beside him, quiet but proud. For once, Jonas was being offered something too. Not for charity, but for trust. He turned to her after the mayor left. "You sure you want to stay here?" She nodded slowly. "It's the first place that ever stayed with me." That night, Lura fell asleep on a pillow made from soft vines and cloth her mother stitched by hand. Valari sat by the window, watching fireflies flicker in the dark. Jonas joined her, pulling a blanket over both their shoulders. They sat without words, the silence between them warm, not heavy. Then Valari whispered, I want to give you something. Jonas raised an eyebrow. Haven't you given enough? She shook her head. No, she said softly. This is different. She stood, walked to a drawer, and pulled out a folded piece of her weaving. One she'd never shown to anyone. It shimmered faintly in the moonlight, patterned with swirling shapes, stars, and a single tree standing tall in the center. She placed it in his hands. Jonas looked at it carefully, then at her. What's this? It's called heartroot, she said. In my culture, you only give this to someone who holds your roots safely. Someone who helped you grow again. Jonas didn't speak. He looked down at the cloth, then up at Valari. His voice was low, almost broken. No one's ever given me something like this. Valari stepped closer. Because no one ever saw you the way I do. They stood there for a long moment, the silence thicker than words. Then Jonas whispered, You gave yourself away once. For food. She nodded. And now, he continued, you've given me something priceless, and you didn't have to. Valari reached for his hand. No one owns me now, she said. I choose you. From the other room, Laura mumbled in her sleep, Mama, Papa. They turned toward the sound, their hands still joined. Jonas smiled. I guess she's made her choice too. Valari laughed gently, her eyes shining with peace. Outside, the stars blinked like old friends watching from afar. Inside, the home, no chains, no cold air. No hunger remained. Only warmth, only peace. Only love born from survival. Valari once gave herself away to feed her child. But in return, a human gave her something far more valuable. Not food, not shelter, not money. He gave her belonging, and that in all the worlds across the galaxy was something no coin could ever buy.